The Galactic Confederation had reached that peculiar stage of cosmic evolution, where boredom masqueraded as wisdom, and the most advanced civilizations spent their time cataloging which lesser species did adorably pointless things. Humans, naturally, topped this list with the enthusiasm of a toddler collecting rocks, except their rocks were data points about atmospheric precipitation patterns on moons that any sensible species would have strip mined for resources eons ago. On Titan, where methane rain fell with the reliability of bureaucratic incompetence, Dr. Evelyn Hartwell stood at her observation post doing exactly what the Confederation's xenobiologists found so charmingly primitive, watching weather. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd traveled 86 million miles to essentially become the galaxy's most overqualified meteorologist, but someone had to document the precise chemical composition of every droplet that fell on Saturn's largest moon. The fact that no other species bothered with such trivial pursuits only made the humans more endearingly backward in alien eyes. Her breath fogged the reinforced viewing port, another delightfully primitive human quirk that amused visiting diplomats while she adjusted the atmospheric sensors for the 14th time that shift. The equipment hummed with the contentment of machinery designed by a species too stubborn to admit when something was unnecessary. Each sensor recorded temperature fluctuations, pressure variations, and molecular compositions with obsessive precision that would make a Volcari accountant weep with joy if Volcari possessed tear ducts or emotions beyond mild disapproval. "Fascinating," she muttered, noting the slight deviation in methane density at coordinates 1 to 183.7. Any reasonable species would have rounded those numbers, but humans had never been accused of being reasonable. The Galactic Council's latest cultural assessment had actually used the phrase pathologically thorough to describe human scientific methodology, which she'd taken as a compliment until realizing it wasn't meant as one. The rain outside fell in patterns that had remained unchanged for millennia, each drop following gravitational laws that every civilization had mastered before achieving interstellar flight. Yet here she was, documenting variations that measured in the thousandths of percentiles, creating databases that would outlive her great-grandchildren and serve no purpose beyond satisfying humanity's inexplicable need to know everything about everything. Ambassador Nexus of the Hegemony had visited last week, his crystalline form radiating polite condescension as he'd observed her work. How wonderfully thorough, he'd said, the pause containing enough diplomatic weight to crush a small asteroid. Your species' dedication to detail continues to astound us. The translation matrix had struggled with the concept of calling someone obsessive without technically insulting them, settling on astound after briefly considering perplex and concern. She'd smiled and nodded, adding another data point to her personal collection of alien microaggressions while explaining that atmospheric research required patience. What she hadn't mentioned was that patience came naturally to a species that had evolved on a planet where weather could kill you if you guessed wrong, making careful observation less of a hobby and more of a survival instinct written into their DNA. The detection array chirped softly, indicating another measurement cycle complete. Pressure holding steady at 1.467 atmospheres. Temperature -7, numbers that would make any advanced civilization yawn if they possessed the jaw structure for yawning. The Confederation's scientists had long ago developed technology that could terraform entire worlds in decades, making detailed weather monitoring about as relevant as studying the mating habits of extinct insects. Yet something in today's readings nagged at her with the persistence of a badly tuned violin. The variations weren't random. They carried a subtle pattern that her human brain evolved to spot predators in tall grass couldn't quite classify but refused to ignore. The methane rain fell with its usual chemical precision, but the underlying pressure fluctuations suggested movement. Large-scale movement. She cross-referenced the data with yesterday's recordings, then last week's, then the entire month's archive. The pattern was there, faint but consistent, like footprints in snow that you only notice when looking at the whole trail. Something was displacing atmospheric mass in volumes that should have been impossible without triggering every sensor in the system. The communication panel flickered to life, displaying a message from the Confederation's Research Division, monthly atmospheric report pending. Please confirm all readings within normal parameters. The bureaucratic assumption that normal parameters existed in a universe where ice moons rained hydrocarbons struck her as optimistically naive, but she'd learned not to mention such philosophical observations in official communication. Her fingers hovered over the response pad as another measurement cycle completed. The readings showed another microscopic deviation, another tiny anomaly in an ocean of data that advanced civilizations would have dismissed as sense adrift. But humans hadn't survived ice ages and plague outbreaks by dismissing tiny anomalies. Outside, Titan's reign continued its ancient rhythm, each drop carrying information that only one species in the galaxy considered worth collecting. As she prepared her response to the Confederation, Hartwell couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in all those numbers, something was trying to tell her a story that no advanced civilization would bother listening to. The sound came at 14:37 local time, registering as a pressure wave that shouldn't have existed according to every known law of atmospheric physics. Hartwell's coffee, real Earth coffee, because humans were sentimental about their stimulants, sloshed in its magnetic cup as the entire observation station shuddered with the delicate grace of a building having an existential crisis. Equipment malfunction, she announced to the empty station, because talking to yourself was another charming human quirk that aliens found endearingly primitive. Advanced species communicated through direct neural interfaces or elegant pheromone exchanges, not crude vocalization that wasted energy and advertised your location to predators. The fact that humans had turned this evolutionary liability into art, poetry and stand-up comedy only reinforced the galactic consensus that they were adorably backward. She pulled up the diagnostic protocols, expecting to find the usual suspects: thermal expansion in the sensor arrays, electromagnetic interference from Saturn's magnetic field, or the occasional micrometeorite impact that registered like cosmic hiccups. Instead, the readings showed something that made her human brain evolve to process impossible things like saber-toothed tigers and tax returns, struggle with the sheer audacity of the number. The seismic sensors had recorded a displacement equivalent to something weighing approximately 47 million tons taking a single step, not falling, not impacting, step, with deliberate controlled movement that implied consciousness, intent, and a profound disregard for the impossibility of its own existence. She ran the diagnostics again because humans possessed an almost pathological inability to accept data that challenged their worldview without extensive verification. The results remained stubbornly identical. Something massive had moved with purpose across Titan's surface, leaving atmospheric disturbances that resembled nothing so much as a footprint the size of downtown Manhattan. The communication array crackled to life with incoming messages from the Galactic Research Network. Hartwell opened the first transmission, which materialized as a holographic projection of Coordinator Vex Prime, whose species had evolved beyond individual names into efficient numerical designation. His crystalline features arranged themselves into what passed for polite concern among beings who had transcended emotional expression. Human researcher, Hartwell. Vex Prime intoned with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. We have received automated alerts regarding seismic anomalies at your facility. Our analysis indicates equipment calibration error. Please implement standard diagnostic procedures and confirm all readings within acceptable parameters. The translation matrix helpfully added subtle condescension to his tone, because the Galactic Council's language protocols had been designed by committee and therefore excelled at passive aggression. The underlying message came through clearly. Humans were experiencing another episode of their charming tendency to see patterns where none existed, like cosmic scale pareidolia with expensive scientific equipment. Coordinator, she began, then paused to gather her thoughts like a diplomat preparing for war. The readings show atmospheric displacement consistent with massive object movement. The pressure differentials alone. Yes, yes. Vex Prime interrupted with the weary patience of a parent dealing with an overzealous child. Human sensory organs are notoriously unreliable. As documented in Cultural Assessment Report, your species demonstrates remarkable creativity in interpreting routine environmental fluctuations as significant events. We recommend recalibrating your instruments and perhaps reducing caffeine intake. The hologram flickered out before she could respond, leaving her staring at empty air and wondering if homicide was still illegal in interstellar space. The Galactic Council's assessment reports had become increasingly patronizing over the years, treating human concerns with the same delicate dismissal reserved for tourist complaints about hotel pillows. Her console chimed with another incoming transmission, this time from the hegemony's scientific division. Ambassador Nexus appeared in shimmering detail, his crystal form refracting light into patterns that conveyed meaning through spectral analysis, a communication method that humans found about as intuitive as performing surgery with oven mitts. Hartwell, he began, his voice carrying harmonics that translated as barely concealed amusement. We understand you've detected what your reports describe as massive atmospheric disturbance. Our long-range sensors show no anomalies in your region. Perhaps your equipment requires maintenance. The hegemony offers excellent calibration services at competitive rates. The subtext hit her like a diplomatic slap. Humans were so technologically primitive that their instruments couldn't be trusted, and everyone knew it. The offer of paid calibration services added insult to injury with the efficiency of a practiced bureaucrat. Ambassador, with respect, she replied, loading the phrase with enough professional courtesy to weaponize it. My readings indicate displacement patterns inconsistent with natural phenomena. The mathematical progression suggests, mathematics nexus interrupted, his crystalline structure shifting into patterns that roughly translated as gentle laughter. How wonderfully human. Your species applies numerical analysis to everything, even atmospheric moisture. Most charming, really. However, advanced civilizations rely on more sophisticated detection methods. The implication hung in the recycled air like an unwelcome house guest. Humans with their primitive number crunching couldn't possibly detect something that superior alien technology had missed. The conversation ended with diplomatic pleasantries that felt like velvet-wrapped insults. Alone again, Dr. Hartwell returned to her instruments with the grim determination of someone whose species had survived by being too stubborn to die when the universe suggested it. The atmospheric readings continued showing impossible patterns, pressure waves that followed geometric progressions, temperature variations that implied massive heat signatures moving with purpose, chemical compositions that suggested something was disturbing Titan's atmosphere through sheer presence, rather than mere passage. She compiled the data into graphs, charts, and three-dimensional models that would have impressed a Renaissance artist and annoyed a modern alien. The patterns were there, undeniable and growing stronger with each measurement cycle. Something was walking across Titan's surface, something so large that its movements registered as geological events. The rain outside continued its ancient rhythm, each drop now carrying evidence that only one species in the galaxy considered worth analyzing. As she prepared another report that would be dismissed as human paranoia, Dr. Hartwell couldn't help but wonder if being right was worth being ignored. Then the sensors detected another step, closer this time, and she realized the question might be academic. The second footstep arrived with the punctuality of a cosmic alarm clock, registering at 15:23 local time with seismic readings that would have impressed a tectonic plate. Hartwell watched her instruments record another impossible event, 47 million tons of something moving with deliberate precision across terrain that should have collapsed under a fraction of that weight. The atmospheric displacement patterns showed increasing complexity, as if whatever was walking had begun to notice its surroundings. She pulled up the orbital surveillance feeds, hoping for visual confirmation that would shut down the diplomatic dismissals currently cluttering her communication channels. The images showed Titan's surface in infrared and visible spectrum, revealing the usual landscape of hydrocarbon lakes, methane rivers, and ice formations that had remained unchanged for geological. Nothing moved except weather patterns and the occasional dust devil. Certainly nothing that could register as a Manhattan-sized footprint. The dichotomy between sensor data and visual evidence created the kind of scientific paradox that kept human researchers awake at night and gave alien bureaucrats. Her instruments insisted something massive was walking across Titan with increasing frequency, while every other detection method in the solar system suggested she was hallucinating with expensive equipment. Another incoming transmission lit up her console, this time from the Confederation's Psychiatric Division. Dr. Hartwell stared at the message header with the dawning horror of someone realizing their professional reputation was circling the drain with gathering velocity. The holographic projection materialized as Dr. Zalara 9, whose species had evolved therapy into an art form involving bioluminescent color changes and empathic resonance fields. Her appearance resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a mood ring, which would have been fascinating under different circumstances. Hartwell Zalara 9 began, her form pulsing with colors that translated as professional concern, mixed with gentle condescension. We've received reports of your recent experiences on Titan. Isolation-induced hallucinations are remarkably common among human researchers. Your species' tendency toward pattern recognition often manifests as false positive detection of significant events. The clinical terminology hit like a verbal sedative. Humans were so psychologically fragile that extended solitude made them imagine giant footsteps where none existed. The Confederation's medical literature was apparently filled with case studies of human researchers who developed elaborate delusions about their work having cosmic significance. Zalara 9,
she replied with the forced politeness of someone whose sanity had just been questioned by a sentient lava lamp. My instruments show consistent readings across multiple sensor arrays. The mathematical correlations. Mathematics again, Zalara 9 interrupted, her bioluminescence shifting to patterns that suggested amused sympathy. Humans apply numerical analysis as a coping mechanism for psychological stress. We recommend immediate psychological evaluation and possible reassignment to less isolated research positions. The transmission ended, with scheduling information for mandatory mental health screenings, because the galaxy's response to inconvenient data was apparently to question the mental stability of whoever collected it. Hartwell found herself contemplating the philosophical implications of being considered insane for doing her job too well. Her contemplation was interrupted by the third footstep, arriving at 1611, with the reliability of celestial mechanics and the subtlety of a small earthquake. This time, the atmospheric readings showed additional complexity, chemical signatures, suggesting massive displacement of surface materials, temperature variations, indicating friction between something solid and Titan's terrain, and pressure waves that followed mathematical sequences, her human brain recognized as intentional patterns. The orbital feeds still showed nothing, maintaining their stubborn insistence that Titan's surface remained as unchanged as diplomatic protocol. Yet her ground-based sensors continued recording evidence of something that defied every known principle of physics, while simultaneously following them with pedantic precision. She began cross-referencing the timing intervals between footsteps, because humans possessed an almost supernatural ability to find patterns in chaos, a trait that had helped them survive everything from ice ages to tax codes. The intervals weren't random: 46 minutes, 48 minutes, now 46 minutes again. Something was walking with measured steps, possibly following a predetermined path that only ground-based atmospheric sensors could detect. The communication array erupted with another wave of concerned messages from various galactic organizations. The Cultural Assessment Division wanted to discuss human tendencies toward elaborate fantasy construction. The Equipment Standards Bureau offered discount rates on sensor replacement. The Interspecies Relations Committee suggested cultural exchange programs to combat isolation-induced paranoia. Each message carried the same underlying assumption: humans were experiencing another episode of their charming inability to distinguish between significant data and random noise. The galaxy's advanced civilizations had apparently reached consensus that atmospheric monitoring on remote moons was bound to drive primitive species to delusions of grandeur. Hartwell compiled her data into increasingly sophisticated presentations, creating visual models that would have impressed a digital artist and bored an alien committee. The footstep patterns showed geoentric regression. The atmospheric disturbances followed thermodynamic principles, and the chemical signatures indicated processes that required massive energy expenditure. Yet every official response treated her findings like symptoms of a psychological condition, rather than scientific data. The irony wasn't lost on her that humanity's reputation for obsessive data collection had become grounds for dismissing their actual discovery. As she prepared for the fourth footstep due in approximately 44 minutes, based on the established pattern, Dr. Hartwell wondered if being the only witness to something impossible was better or worse than being ignored by everyone who should have been listening. The rain continued falling outside, each drop now carrying evidence of something that officially didn't exist, walking across a moon where nothing was supposed to move. She checked her instruments one final time, noting the increasing complexity of the atmospheric disturbance. Whatever was out there was getting closer, and apparently she was the only human stubborn enough to keep watching.
The fourth footstep arrived precisely on schedule, but this time it brought company. Dr. Hartwell watched her instruments register not one but 17 simultaneous impacts across Titan's northern hemisphere, each one generating seismic signatures that would have made earthquake enthusiasts weep with joy. The atmospheric displacement patterns showed geometric formations that suggested intelligence, purpose, and a complete disregard for the galactic consensus that nothing significant ever happened on backwater moons. She stared at the data streaming across her displays with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for watching politicians attempt science. The readings indicated something that her human brain evolved to recognize: threats hiding behind bushes, immediately classified as very bad news. 17 massive entities had apparently decided to coordinate their movements, creating pressure waves that formed mathematical patterns visible from orbit. The revelation hit her with the subtle impact of a freight train carrying existential dread. These weren't random footsteps, they were synchronized, purposeful, and following algorithmic progressions that required the kind of intelligence that advanced galactic civilizations claimed didn't exist on primitive worlds like Titan. Her communication array exploded with incoming transmissions as various alien monitoring stations finally detected anomalies too large to dismiss as human hallucinations. The first message came from the hegemony's Deep Space Surveillance Division, whose previous communications had treated her concerns like quaint folklore from backward species. Hartwell came the transmission from Commander Brick 7, whose crystalline form now pulsed with colors that translated as barely controlled panic. Our gravitational sensors are detecting massive displacement events in your sector. Please confirm your readings and prepare for immediate evacuation protocols. The irony wasn't lost on her that aliens had suddenly developed interest in human data collection methods now that their sophisticated detection systems were registering the same impossible event. Apparently, atmospheric monitoring became scientifically valid the moment advanced civilizations could confirm it with their own instruments. She pulled up the deep scan analysis protocols, running algorithms that cross-referenced atmospheric disturbances with geological surveys dating back 3 centuries. What she found made her coffee go cold with implications that would have terrified a conspiracy theorist. The footstep patterns matched subsurface anomalies that previous surveys had classified as natural mineral formations. The mineral formations were moving. Hartwell began correlating the historical data with current readings, because humans possessed an almost pathological need to understand things that wanted to kill them. The subsurface masses had been dormant for millennia, buried beneath Titan's icy crust, like cosmic hibernation pods waiting for the right atmospheric conditions to trigger awakening. Her instruments showed increasing complexity in the electromagnetic signatures surrounding each entity. The readings suggested technology that operated on principles unknown to current galactic science, using energy sources that shouldn't have existed according to theoretical physics. Whatever was walking across Titan had been sleeping beneath the surface until something, possibly the atmospheric changes her station had been monitoring, woke them up. The communication array buzzed with another incoming transmission, this time from the Confederation's Archaeological Division. Dr. Feng 12 materialized in holographic form, her insectoid features arranged in expressions that roughly translated as academic excitement mixed with existential terror. "Hartwell," she began, her mandibles clicking with rhythms that indicated urgent information transfer, "we've been analyzing your atmospheric data in conjunction with xenoarchaeological surveys. The patterns you've recorded match theoretical models for dormant predecessor technology." The word predecessor carried enough historical weight to crush small civilization. Every species in the galaxy knew the legends, an ancient civilization that had vanished eons before current galactic society developed, leaving behind artifacts that defied comprehension and structures that made contemporary technology look like stone tools. "The entities you've detected," Dr. Feng 12 continued, "appear to be predecessor constructs that have been dormant for approximately 12 million years. Your atmospheric monitoring station may have inadvertently triggered their reactivation through electromagnetic interference patterns." Dr. Hartwell felt her worldview reorganize itself with the efficiency of continental drift. Her pointless weather monitoring had apparently awakened sleeping giants that predated galactic civilization by geological epoch. The irony was so profound it achieved artistic merit. Humanity's obsessive data collection had accidentally solved the galaxy's greatest archaeological mystery while simultaneously creating its newest existential threat. The implications cascaded through her mind like dominoes made of pure panic. If predecessor constructs were waking up across Titan, their movement toward populated systems would represent a threat that current galactic military forces weren't equipped to handle. Advanced alien civilizations had spent millennia trying to understand predecessor technology. Now 17 examples were taking walking lessons on a moon that everyone had dismissed as scientifically irrelevant. Her instruments detected additional movement signatures, suggesting more constructs were awakening throughout Titan's subsurface. The atmospheric disturbances were spreading, creating interference patterns that reached beyond the Moon's gravity well and into space where they might trigger responses from other dormant sites. Hartwell realized with crystalline clarity that her atmospheric research station had become ground zero for the galaxy's next major crisis. The same obsessive human attention to atmospheric details that aliens found so charmingly primitive had provided the only early warning system capable of detecting the return of the predecessors. As she prepared emergency transmissions to every galactic authority who had previously dismissed her concern, she couldn't help but appreciate the cosmic irony. Humanity's reputation for seeing patterns where none existed had finally proven correct about a pattern that everyone else had missed for 12 million years. The Galactic Emergency Council convened with the kind of bureaucratic panic usually reserved for tax audits and diplomatic incidents involving inappropriate metaphors. Representatives from every major civilization materialized in holographic splendor around Hartwell's observation station, their various forms of advanced evolution, united in the common experience of realizing they'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. Chancellor Voss Prime of the hegemony flickered into view first, his crystalline structure now pulsing with colors that roughly translated as, "We may have been slightly mistaken about human competence." Behind him, the assembled dignitaries of galactic civilization arranged themselves with the dignity of people trying to pretend they hadn't just ignored the most important scientific discovery in 12 million years. Hartwell Voss Prime began with the careful tone of someone admitting they'd accidentally started an apocalypse. "Our combined military forces have detected 17 predecessor constructs moving through your solar system toward populated sectors. Our weapons systems appear to be inadequate for addressing this situation." The translation matrix struggled with diplomatic ways to say completely useless, eventually settling on inadequate with undertones of barely suppressed terror. The galaxy's most advanced military technology, capable of sterilizing entire star systems, had proven about as effective against predecessor constructs as harsh language against natural disasters. Hartwell looked up from her instruments, where she'd been tracking the construct's movement patterns with the same obsessive attention to detail that had gotten her into this situation. Her atmospheric monitoring equipment, dismissed as primitive by every advanced civilization, was apparently the only technology capable of predicting the entity's behavior. "The constructs are following atmospheric pressure gradients," she reported with the casual tone of someone delivering weather forecasts instead of galactic doom predictions. "Their movement patterns suggest they're navigating by detecting stellar wind variations and gravitational field fluctuations. Essentially, they're following space weather." The assembled representatives exchanged glances that transcended species barriers, united in the universal expression of people realizing their expensive military hardware was useless, while a human with weather monitoring equipment held the keys to survival. The irony was so profound it achieved philosophical significance. The galaxy's most primitive species had accidentally become its most qualified experts on predecessor technology. Commander Nexus of the Scientific Division materialized with holographic edges that flickered like a bad internet connection, his usual condescending demeanor replaced by something resembling desperate hope. "Dr. Hartwell, can your atmospheric analysis predict their destination?" She pulled up her predictive models, algorithms designed to forecast methane rain patterns that had somehow become the galaxy's most sophisticated early warning system for ancient apocalyptic constructs. The mathematical progressions showed convergence points that made her stomach perform impressive acrobatic feats. "They're heading for the inner systems," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of someone who just solved and simultaneously created the galaxy's biggest problem. "Following solar wind patterns that will bring them to every major population center within 18 standard cycles." The council erupted in harmonized panic, various species expressing existential dread through bioluminescence, harmonic frequencies and pheromone releases that her translation matrix couldn't adequately process. The galaxy's leadership had apparently reached consensus that impending doom transcended linguistic barriers. However, Dr. Hartwell continued with the timing of someone who understood dramatic effect. "The constructs appear to be responding to specific atmospheric composition. They're avoiding regions with high concentrations of industrial pollutants and gravitating toward areas with natural atmospheric conditions." The implications hit the assembled dignitaries like a collective slap from the universe itself. Humanity's reputation for environmental destruction, another trait that advanced civilizations found charmingly backwards, might actually serve as a deterrent against predecessor constructs that preferred pristine atmospheric conditions. 6 months later, Dr. Hartwell stood at the same observation post on Titan,
watching methane rain fall with patterns that now carried information about 17 dormant predecessor constructs, maintaining stable orbits around unpopulated gas giants. Her atmospheric monitoring station had become the galaxy's most important early warning system, staffed by researchers whose obsessive attention to weather patterns had accidentally saved galactic civilization. The Confederation had established the Human Atmospheric Analysis Division, with a budget larger than some star systems' economies, recognizing that sometimes the most primitive approach to science yielded the most sophisticated result. Every major world now employed human meteorologists as predecessor activity specialists, because apparently the key to understanding galaxy-threatening ancient technology was paying attention to cosmic weather patterns. Ambassador Voss Prime visited weekly now, his crystalline form displaying colors that translated as profound gratitude mixed with lingering embarrassment. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had learned to appreciate the value of human stubbornness, particularly when applied to data collection that everyone else considered pointless. As Hartwell watched Titan's rain continue its ancient rhythm, each drop carrying information that only one species in the galaxy considered worth collecting, she couldn't help but smile at the cosmic joke. Sometimes being too primitive to know when something was impossible turned out to be the most advanced approach of all. The universe, it seemed, had quite the sense of humor about who it chose to save it.